Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me? Right. My name is Estes, and I am the meditation portion of this music and meditation program. But don't worry, Dave and Bruce will be right back. Music is great. I love the way you synchronized it with the horns honking and the planes flying over. We appreciate it. When Craig told me or invited me to do this, he said I could talk about anything I want. If I ever get invited back, he may want to tighten my reins after this. But I titled this particular talk, Fun Friday and the Manipulation of Time. My wife Peggy is here today as well. We just got back from a month in the British Isles. We spent 2 weeks in London wandering around, and then 2 weeks on a Viking cruise cruising around the British Isles. We got on the boat in a place called Greenwich, just down the Thames from London, and I had only heard of it in one context. It's a nice town, but I only knew it as the place that holds the prime meridian. That's where distance begins, time begins, and so we paid an overpriced visit up to the Royal Greenwich Observatory and had our picture taken on the prime meridian, 1 foot in the east, 1 foot in the west, very much like you would do at 4 corners of the continental divide. But in the interest of time, it's a significant landmark. When becoming a global planet back in 1884, Greenwich, despite France's objections, was designated the prime meridian. And so when you're dealing with location, it's pretty inflexible. You've got latitude and longitude, and every point on Earth has a very specific meaning in terms of that, and you really can't mess with it. Time, on the other hand, you can. Part of what they did was slice the planet into 24 15-degree slices, each one representing an hour of time. And that one, fortunately, has a whole bunch of flexibility. If you take a look at the time zone map of the United States, it's not a straight meridian. It doesn't go through somebody's living room or through a particular neighborhood. It conforms to the boundaries of rivers, state boundaries, and in some cases, counties. So a little flexibility is good. Each country is able to decide for itself how it wants to have time conducted in this country. A couple of countries have gone off the grid. Nepal, for example, is 12 hours and 45 minutes ahead of California. India, its neighbor and often tormentor, big continent, takes up 2 time zones, but they have 1 time zone for all of India, and they're out of sync by 30 minutes with the rest of the world. So it gets interesting. Prime meridian is interesting. Probably the more interesting one than that is 180 degrees out, the international date line, where you switch your calendar back and forth. So it's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, so we weren't able to have 1 foot in the present and 1 foot in the past. But it's an interesting system. Time was brought back to us again as we went from Indergordon in the Highlands of Scotland off to Bergen in Norway. We got told, when you go to sleep, turn your clock up an hour, which meant we were either crossing a meridian or crossing one of those nation-made boundaries that we had to turn our clock up an hour. That's the way it works. Probably the most extreme case of this I've seen is when I was assigned to Fort Benning, and Peggy was working in a Michelin plant in Opelika, Alabama. So she would leave the house at 8 o'clock and arrive at work at 7:30. So the journey home wasn't quite as pleasant, but that's an extreme case, but that's how we standardize time. What I want to talk about is how we manipulate time to make our lives better. God was good at this, better than we are. Joshua 10 tells of how God made the sun and the moon stand still for another number of hours so Joshua could defeat the Ammonites in Canaan and have enough extra daylight to do that. A little tougher for us to pull that one off, but we can manipulate time to the same effect. The Germans were the first to do it. Similarly, in a wartime environment, in 1916, they found that there was tactical advantage to getting an extra hour of daylight in the summer hours on the battlefield. Britain soon followed suit, and the United States in 1918 adopted what we now know as daylight savings time for the very first time. When the war ended, it stopped. World War II came along. Franklin Roosevelt put us on permanent daylight savings time for the duration of the war. And when that war ended, we went off it as well. And throughout the 1950s and 60s, we tried a lot of different things. Local jurisdictions were free to decide whether they would do daylight savings time or not do it. They would pick when they started, when they stopped. If a little bit of flexibility was good, a lot of flexibility can be really bad. And so Congress had to get involved to straighten things out, and they did in 1966 with the Uniform Time Act that said, all right, Americans, we're going to do daylight savings time. We're going to start it on the last Sunday in April, and we're going to come off of it in the last Sunday of October, basically putting us on daylight savings time for 27 weeks. That was great, but it soon devolved as political constituents said, I don't want this. The louder ones, the politicians tried to pacify. So it started to, I said, devolve. During the 70s, early 70s, during the energy crisis, we went on permanent daylight savings time. There were multiple attempts to lengthen the daylight savings time. So Congress got involved again with the Energy Policy Act of 2005. Where they said, they closed some of the loopholes from the previous act and said, all right, daylight savings time is now going to start in the second Sunday of March, and it's going to end in the first Sunday of November. And the switch from last Sunday in October to first Sunday in November was mainly so the kids would have an extra hour of light when they trick-or-treat for Halloween. I thought you're supposed to trick-or-treat in the dark, but that's what Congress came up with in 2005, and that's the system we live with today. We almost lost that this past year. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida proposed the Sunshine Protection Act, which would have put us on permanent daylight savings time, and we wouldn't have to switch our clocks twice a year. A lot of people liked it. The Senate passed it. It went to the House of Representatives, and literally, time expired, and it died in committee, and we aren't going there. I am sure the citizens of Florida probably would have liked that particular act. I'm not sure the residents of New York City would have appreciated not seeing the sun until 9:30 in the morning on January mornings. So I personally was glad to see it die, but every constituent has their own preference. For me, I like to get a bike ride in before church starts, and I could not have done that under Senator Rubio's plan, so I was against it. I personally like daylight savings time. It marks the passage of seasons. We don't celebrate that enough. It's hard here in San Luis Obispo, where the weather is perfect all the time. We don't have snow or falling leaves or sweltering humid days to celebrate the passage of the seasons. Daylight savings time does that a little bit, so I like it. But not everybody agrees, and it's more controversial than you might expect. In fact, the Business Insider in 2024 stated that daylight savings time is one of the most controversial and impossible issues of our time. Given the issues of our time, that's a bit of a stretch, but it works well for my presentation here today. But it is very difficult to get consensus. There was a YouGov poll in 2023, and it found that 39% of the population preferred year-round daylight savings time. 23% wished we would just stay on standard time and forget about the whole thing. 21% said we should continue to change our clocks twice a year as we do now, and 17% weren't sure. So how do we possibly resolve that? And that's what gets into the crux of my thesis today, and finally getting around to it, is how do we bring America together on this issue? How do we make the changing of the clocks more palatable to the American population? The fall was great. You can't argue with the fall. 2 o'clock in the morning, you turn your clock back an hour, the entire nation is treated to an additional hour of sleep.
You can't miss church because all you could do is be early rather than late, which is an opportunity to thank the glories of God for an extra hour. And so the fall is wonderful. The spring, on the other hand, for the spring, you get 2 o'clock, you change the clock up to 3. The entire nation is denied an hour's sleep, and you can be late and miss critical events if you forget about it. So I contend it's the spring we need to work with. Is there a way that America can win on both times that you turn up the clock? And I say yes, if you be just a little bit imaginative. And so my proposal to the world is Fun Friday. I propose what we do is take some Friday, somewhere between mid-March and mid-April, and on that Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we turn the clock up at 5 o'clock. Everybody goes home an hour early. Everybody wins. And there might be some problems with it. You have to advertise it really well. But the way you advertise it really well is you turn it into a holiday. People never forget holidays. Have you ever forgotten Christmas? Have you ever forgotten Halloween? So no, we create a holiday called Fun Friday. Bars literally have happy hours for the hour that just went away. Stores have Fun Friday sales. It's a win-win for everybody. It celebrates the real true beginning of spring. I remember as a kid, the true beginning of spring wasn't the equinox, it was daylight savings time when I got to go out and play after dinner. Same sort of thing, it becomes a celebration. New Year's Eve it works. We have bands playing, people dancing, the population reveling as we go from time zone to time zone to time zone and watch the ball drop and a countdown to a new year. We can do something similar as we make an hour go away. You may say, well, what about the train schedules and the airline schedules? It's too complicated. No, it's not. It would be complicated in the fall where you repeat an hour. Are you talking about 1/3, the first 1:30 or the second 1:30? That would be a challenge. But in the spring, the hour just goes away. Was that you, God? you lose out on, nobody will schedule a ticket because the hour goes from away. From 4 to 5, it goes away. You can't schedule a plane ticket for 4:30 in the afternoon. So it would work, and that is my solution. If I decide to throw my hat into the presidential campaign, that will be my entire platform. No other country in the world has thought of it. America can lead the way. Remember, you heard it first. And with that, David Bruce.